Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a look through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and here is this week's squad. Well, if it isn't Matt Wells, always holding it down for MMA Junkie and the Big D. Of course, the Boston shot caller, he's back, one of the top reporters in MMA. It's Nolan King, and from the mean streets of Santa Ana, California, it's Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. Cold coffee on the ones and twos. Let's get to it, fellas. All right, folks, UFC London was tremendous. We have some topics to discuss from that night. I promise there'll be a tie-in, but the biggest name in the sport is at it again with the call-outs. Conor McGregor wants Kamaru Usman. What's behind this call-out? Has he absolutely lost his mind, or can you see a scenario where this happens? 4 minutes are on the clock. Matt, get things started.
Listen, Conor McGregor's just doing Conor McGregor things as usual. It's smart for him to, I guess, shoot for the stars, so to speak, right? He's the biggest name in the sport. Saying outlandish things has been part of his shtick for forever. So, of course, why not call out Kamaru Usman? Why not get people interested in his name again? Will it actually happen? No, it's a long shot. I mean, listen, the guy's lost four out of his last five, or 3 of his last 4 fights, or something like that, right? It's just not a realistic thing to go in there and step in against Kamaru Usman, who's not lost in the UFC. So it's just like one of those things where it's go out, if the mic is hot, just say whatever it is to keep people interested in you and make people overlook your string of losses. It's just not realistic. It's about as realistic as Kamaru Usman fighting Canelo, and thinking he has a chance to win. So that's where I'm at on that. I'm just unrealistic.
Yeah, as unrealistic as I thought him fighting Oliveira was, because like you said, 3 of his last 4, if you want to throw Floyd in there, 4 of his last 5 combat sports events, man, a division higher, that's crazy. All right, Nolan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Matt up until a certain point. I think, it is Conor being Conor. He's trying to think of as many avenues into big fights as possible and talking his way into them. And, I don't think that that's necessarily the one that the UFC would want. Kamaru Usman is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. Stylistically, I think it would be a nightmare, and it could further Conor McGregor's decline in terms of wins and losses. But it is Conor, and Conor's talked his way into crossover fights with Floyd Mayweather, title fights that didn't make sense, rematches against Nate Diaz for no reason. So I'm never going to rule anything out with him. I just think out of all the constant call-outs that come out of his mouth, I think this would be kind of the one that would have the least upside for him. 155 pounds is a very competitive division right now. I think that's still the one people seem to gravitate towards. And even though it doesn't necessarily make any sense to give him another shot at that same belt, and there might be some intrigue with him going to welterweight, I think that those are the matchups that people would still want to see. Him versus a Charles Oliveira, him versus a Justin Gaethje. So I think he'd have a better deal, a better chance of, talking himself into a deal for a lightweight title shot. Or a Nate Diaz trilogy. I think those are the ones he should be gravitating towards. He doesn't want a piece of Usman because I don't think that result will end well for him.
Crazier things have happened, that's for sure. And I do remember once Chael Sonnen losing for the second time to Anderson Silva, and then he got the John Jones title shot. So who knows? Goes, finish things off. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're right. I think crazier things have happened, but they're usually accompanied by somebody with a twirling mustache going, which is pretty much what Dana White would have to do at this point if he wants to put this fight together. I think if you look at what's going on, I don't feel like this is really a message to Kamaru Usman as much as it is a message to Nate Diaz. I think Conor realizes the situation that Nate's in, and he's just trying to let him know there are other options here that I can go with. Now, whether Nate takes the bait and thinks that that's actually a possibility, we don't know. But, it's maybe something that the UFC kind of likes as well, right? Putting pressure on fighters, trying to make them take the fights they want. So there's a lot that plays out in negotiations, but come on. I don't think this makes any sense whatsoever. And even if you did it, like as big as Conor McGregor is, he needs a dance partner if you want to make it massive. And I don't know that Kamaru Usman's that dance partner. I don't know that the press conference would be as interesting as it would be with like a Nate Diaz or even with Dustin Poirier, right? You need somebody to play off. And I don't know that Kamaru Usman can really do that. And what message are you sending to the people below Kamaru Usman? Great fighters, some that have had a chance before and some that haven't. It's a little bit of a slap in the face for those guys as well. So I think it's a bad idea.
He definitely has his plate full, and then there's guys like Luque and Muhammad and Shemaev that are right behind him. All right, good stuff, guys. Moving on to question or topic number 2, Paddy Pimblett from the London card. He notched another win on Saturday and mostly stole the show, which featured some many bright moments. Heck, on social media, many were comparing this kid to the notorious one. You see, I connected the dots there from the first question. UFC president Dana White even said he's the real deal. That was his quote. Fellas, is he right? Do you agree with the UFC head honcho? Nolan, 4 minutes are on the clock. Start things off.
Well, I think he's the real deal when it comes to fight promotion, but there's two sides to the fight game, and one of them is the promotion side, and one of them is the actual what happens when you get in the cage. How do your skills match up against other people in the division? And I'm certainly not a Paddy Pimblett hater by any means. I actually thoroughly enjoy his interviews. I think sometimes people are generated to doubt somebody because they're living their best life, which he clearly is. I mean, he's thriving. He had his big moment on Saturday. Seems like he's kind of already got the world behind him, or at least England behind him, going full force up the UFC ladder as of right now. But I think when it comes to, inside the cage, so to speak, I think comparing him and Conor is just a bit unfair at this point. I mean, look at the debut that Conor had, versus the debut that Paddy had. I mean, look at the second fights, how those ones differed in terms of momentum. I'm talking about what happened in the cage. Both fights, Paddy did get hurt in. This one wasn't, you could say he got clipped, he got knocked down, he got, stumbled, whatever. But I think we need to see a lot more of him inside the cage before we start drawing that comparison. And I think it's kind of unfair, right? It's such a high ceiling to compare, anybody to Conor McGregor. I think that he was such a unique character, and watching Paddy's whole thing on Saturday, it felt big. He felt like a star, but I still think it was just, you can't compare it to Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is his own beast. I would maybe even be willing to say that in my lifetime, we'll never see anybody that amasses that amount of popularity that quickly and advances the sport's recognition as a whole that much. So with that being said, I think he's a rare breed. I think Paddy Pimblett is ready to kind of really be somebody the UFC throws a lot of hype behind, but we got to see some improvements in the cage as well.
Yeah, you're definitely right. After 2 fights, I think McGregor was definitely more clinical and more destined for superstardom at that point. All right, Goes, how about you, man? The real deal? Are you buying into this? What's going on?
I mean, I don't blame Dana White for saying what he said. I think he's just kind of getting wrapped up. A lot of us got wrapped up in the moment of how loud that crowd was, the reaction that they gave, everything. It depends on what we define the real deal, like Nolan said. Fans want to see him. I'm going to tune in. I think he's a good fighter, but in no means do I think he's a great fighter just yet. I wouldn't really compare him to Conor McGregor as much as I would compare him to Sean O'Malley, right? A guy that comes in with a different type of swag. He definitely has a skill set. What we just don't know, what the big question is he a title contender? Would he be able to fight with those guys up there? And I think right now, if you look at, there are a couple holes here and there that I think he has to shore up, and he just has to do that through experience. Take your time, right? The promotion is behind you. The fans are behind you. Just take your time, man, and you'll get there. But right now, this is one of the toughest divisions in the world. I just don't think he has it right at this moment.
I like the comparison. That's a little bit more tame. O'Malley and Pimblett. Yeah, okay, I'm with you there. How about you, Matt Wells? Conor McGregor, are you seeing it, or is it too much?
I'm seeing it in terms of, the crowd reaction, having a whole country behind your back to support you. When he hits the tunnel for the walkout, the entire arena goes crazy. I think that's where the comparisons stop, because they're not at all the same fighter. I mean, Paddy can tap you out. Conor couldn't do that. But Conor, what really elevated his star power was his ability to knock anybody out and look like a ghost in there. Like, he was floating. He seemed untouchable, at his ascent to the top. And I mean, just look at what he did, to Jose Aldo, Eddie Alvarez. He just made those guys look like they were complete jokes in there. And that's something that we're not seeing from Paddy just yet. He's getting touched, but he's still winning the fights. So if he can turn that around, if he can find some aura of invincibility inside the cage, then yeah, he can capture more of Conor in that aspect. But right now, it's just about popularity. And that's where the comparisons really stop for me.
Good, strong points, man. Pimblett on the ground is a beast, and he did make quick work of those 2 champions you talked about, Alvarez and John Jones. All right, another star from that night, Tom Aspinall. He made quick work of Alexander Volkov in the main event. He's now 12-2 overall, 5-0 in the UFC. With Francis Ngannou's uncertainty, due to injury recovery and his contract status, along with John Jones' expected arrival to heavyweight and, Tai Tuivasa's emergence. What does this statement win mean for him and the rest of the heavyweight division? I want you guys to kind of maybe play matchmaker and lay out the future. Give me some names. Go, start things off. You got 4 minutes.
Well, first of all, that was just an incredible performance. The atmosphere, what he did in the cage, it all matched up. It was a perfect scenario, and it was over a guy that a lot of big name fighters have had problems with. So I think it's a great move for Tom Aspinall. But I think where it puts him is, if you look at Tai Tuivasa, who he called out, and look at what he did, I feel like he got into that little circle. I feel like Aspinall's still outside of the circle, maybe looking in, maybe one more win puts him up with those names. But it can get kind of tricky here with the heavyweight division, guys. I like the Tuivasa call out. I understand why he did it. It makes sense. But I don't know if the UFC would want to do that, because I think they would want to kind of conserve both those guys to face the champion at some point. Now, what could throw a monkey wrench in all this is John Jones. That's just what's going to happen. If John Jones comes back, then I think they do want to match him up with Stipe Miocic. And in that case, this fight would possibly make much sense. But if you're Tai Tuivasa, I feel like you have more cards to play here. I think you have to remind everyone constantly, I'm willing to fight John or Stipe. Let's get this going. And that would probably hurt Tom Aspinall a little bit. So I think Tom Aspinall is kind of on the outside looking in, but could possibly sneak in on one of these cards and maybe serve as one of those backup fights, right, that are on the card, 2 heavyweight matchups. Something happens, some guy slips up, you never know. But the future is very bright for this guy.
No doubt about that. Matt, tell me something here. Or excuse me, Nolan, tell me something here. So, excuse me, Matt. It is on you, Matt. Sorry. Tell me something here. He's won 4 fights in 1 round and 1 fight in 2 rounds. So, we haven't even seen, what Aspinall can do past that. So, is it better to take it slow, Matt Wells?
I mean, you would think so, but it's kind of hard to now because the way he performed, in front of that crowd, it kind of surprised him as well, because he was expecting a 5-round fight with Volkov, but he made it look easy, got him out of there and won. And in addition to that, he also kind of started believing that, hey, you know what? I am kind of in the top now. You listen to his post-fight interview, he's like, you know what? The crowd does like me. They do like the way I fight. Maybe I do deserve to be in that top 5. Maybe I do deserve to be in main events, in contention for this title. He's still probably 2 fights away because, like Go said, the wild card in John Jones, he can pop up. John Jones is probably going to get in that interim title fight against, whether it be Stipe or Cyril Gane, whoever ends up getting that. He's probably still 2 fights away, but I would like to see Aspinall in there, against the Derek Lewis or Tai Tuivasa, top 5 guys to really, solidify his skills. Because right now he looks every bit like the real deal. It's just going to be a matter of how it all shakes out at the very, very top. But I'm on board with it, man. He looks amazing, and I'm really interested to see how this division shakes out over the next year.
And let's not forget, we also got Blades and Dacus this weekend. I don't know, man. Has the heavyweight division ever popped as much as it has recently? Nolan, finish things off, man. What do you see in the future for Aspinall and the UFC's heavyweight division?
Yeah, I mean, we're hitting a point where the UFC's heavyweight division is almost too strong. I mean, for a long time, I feel like the heavier weight classes, we were like, oh, why aren't there new contenders? Why aren't there, more matchups of elite fighters? And now with the heavyweight division, I mean, it's a real logjam. I mean, Francis is on the shelf, obviously. Jones, Stipe, you got the big names. You got Tuivasa surging. Now you have Aspinall. You also have Curtis Blades fighting this weekend, who, sure, maybe he's not very close. He's a couple wins away from a title shot, but he's still a guy that's a really tough out for, 99% of the heavyweights in the world. So he's somebody I would still put in that category as well. This is all kind of reminiscent to me of the middleweight division a few years ago, where Michael Bisping was champion and Dan Henderson was waiting for his title shot. And we had all these really good fighters that ended up eliminating each other. And then the division kind of became weak. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen here. I would like to see Tom Aspinall fight the winner of Curtis Blades. This weekend, if Curtis wins, I'd like to see them fight. That would be my pick.
Yeah, and then we get to see how he is, tested on the ground. And let's not forget Jairzinho, Blagoy, Derek Lewis, lots of mid-card guys that can definitely, test some of these young guys. All right, guys, what the heck is going on with Nate Diaz? I mean, we know he's got 1 fight left on his UFC contract. He wants Dustin Poirier. He's even talked about it possibly being a retirement fight. But out of nowhere, he comes up with, hey, I want to fight with my teammate Yancy Medeiros on the Bellator card in Hawaii. Holy cow. And just a few weeks ago, Dana White seemed optimistic about re-signing him. What do you guys make of what's happening? What's the holdup here? 4 minutes are on the clock. Matt Wells, start things off.
I think the holdup is, somebody that we already talked about on this show today, and that's Conor McGregor. I mean, listen, if Nate Diaz if he only has one more fight left in the UFC, it has to be Conor McGregor. You have to shore up that trilogy and in that rivalry. There's nothing else that makes sense. Yeah, sure, the Dustin Poirier fight sounds amazing, and it probably would be a very fun fight to watch, right? But if you are going to send Nate Diaz on his way with one last fight, why would you not close up that trilogy? There's just way too much money to be made there. That's obviously going to headline any pay-per-view you want to put it on, because the UFC obviously is not scared to put on, pay-per-view fights without, main events without a title on the line. That's the one that you have to make happen. I don't care, how long we have to wait. If we have to wait till November, December, for Conor to heal up and be ready to compete again, that's the fight you need to make. I mean, there's nothing else that makes sense to me. So that's the one I want. I want Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor trilogy to be shored up. It's an exciting trilogy. The rivalry has been there for years. So go ahead and close that up if we only get one more Nate Diaz in the UFC.
It is funny how these two guys just tie up so many storylines in MMA. Nolan, you remember a few years ago, I think Dana White said he wasn't a needle mover, and look at us. He's popped up on 3 different topics. What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think people are making maybe a little bit more out of it than it actually is. Like, if you look at history, I mean, Nate Diaz and the UFC have never had a relationship that's seemingly lined up until there's a fight on the books, right? Things seem to be bad. Nate pulls out of doesn't want to have anything to do with Dustin after Dustin pulled out of their matchup originally, and then all of a sudden, poof, he's back. So I wouldn't be surprised if, I know Dana said talks are going well. Nate's indicating that they're not through, his tweets, what you can infer from them tweeting at Bellator, things like that. Who knows what's really going on? But I do know that we will see Nate fight again. Like Matt said, it should be Conor McGregor. That's the fight that not only is the money fight, but it actually makes sense too. So that's something that we don't usually get. Usually it's kind of one or the other. But I think people shouldn't be reading too much into what's going on, because Nate Diaz is being Nate Diaz. And I bet you we see him fight, in the next 3, 4, 5 months.
So should there maybe be some sort of a hook, like, hey, we'll give you give us McGregor at some point, but give us Poirier for now, and let's just crunch some numbers and agree to that rather than let him go after one more fight?
That just doesn't sound like something that the Diaz camp would really want to do. And these guys, the Diaz brothers, have been very difficult to deal with when it comes to these types of things in the past, but we've kind of all gotten used to it. But they're not the only ones. That's the thing. And you guys laid it out perfectly. There's so many names involved now, and so much money on the line, and things that the UFC wants to do. I mean, we got this brand new stadium here, Allegiant Stadium. Boy, if you're going to do a stadium show, I know Conor and Nate, that would be a fun one to have in there. So
heck yeah.
I think it's Nate Diaz. Honestly, I think he just wants to keep his name out there, and I get it. If he were to sign a multi-fight deal, then I think it's Dustin Poirier. But if it's just one and gone, then it has to be Conor McGregor, like you guys said. I just feel like in life right now, Conor and Nate are bound because there's the third fight that has to happen. But at the same time, they're kind of each other's insurance policy. They could go on to lose the next 2 fights, and where most fans would say, I don't want to see them fight again. If they just bring up those 2 names together, we're all in again because there's animosity. We know something is left unsettled. And so they're kind of each other's insurance policy here. So I don't know really what's going to happen here. I think Nate's just kind of being Nate. And like Nolan said, I think maybe we're making too much of it. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to make it happen. But I think it'll be multi-fight. I don't think it's Nate Diaz's last fight in the UFC.
The minute you said stadium, that stadium we have here, yeah, how can we not do part 3 in Allegiant Stadium? January is a good time to book. The Raiders usually don't use it in January. All right, that's just a tip from me to the UFC. Let's finish up with this, guys. Former UFC flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson competes in a hybrid fight. So it's like MMA and Muay Thai rules. I'll explain in a second. His opponent that night is going to be the ONE Championship Muay Thai flyweight champion, Rodtang Jitmunyang. This fight's going to take place this weekend on the ONE X card. What are your thoughts on the matchup and its rule set that alters MMA and Muay Thai every round? And what's your prediction? They're going to start with Muay Thai, and then they'll go MMA, back to Muay Thai, and so on. But I think that's kind of a huge advantage there that they're going with the Muay Thai start. All right, 4 minutes are on the clock. Nolan, get things going.
I mean, last week we talked about how there's so many promotions and it's hard to keep up with them. And is MMA kind of, are these promotions doing themselves a disservice by booking on the same night? Well, this is a way to make yourself different, right? This is a way to make yourself stand out, is to have something that's different, have some people with name recognition too. That's obviously important. And sure, you have the greatest, arguably the greatest, I think everybody's kind of on the consensus, Demetrious Johnson's greatest flyweight in MMA history against Rodtang, obviously bringing in his legacy of combat sports as well. So I dig it. I think it's a new idea. Maybe when we watch it play out, it will be terrible. I have no idea because I don't think we've really seen stuff like this before, which is kind of the whole point and the intrigue. So for me, I'm going to side with Demetrious. I think if he survives the first round and then goes into the MMA mode, I think Rodtang will be a lot more out of his league than DJ trying to do his best not to get knocked out in a Muay Thai fight. But I dig it, man. I think that this is the type of stuff that one needs to do. It has the crossover into the American markets with a name like Demetrious Johnson. And I think it should gauge some interest, I think both their names carry some weight around the world,
Careful with that greatest flyweight ever label, man. Triple C came at me this weekend. Goes, are you excited about this fight, man? You've seen a lot of MMA. Is this something different outside the box that's got the juices flowing?
I have no problem with this, especially with a guy like Demetrious Johnson that's done so much in the sport already. I have no problems with himself looking to test himself in this way. The flexibility of these types of cards, the things that One Championship does, I think that's something that probably drew Demetrious Johnson to One Championship. So yeah, if you're going to do that, I have no problem with it. But the guy he chose is a complete badass. If you guys don't know much about Rodtang, this guy is an animal. And with small gloves, remember, they're alternating, but they're wearing MMA gloves. So I can't imagine what a strike from this guy is going to feel like. I expect Rodtang to just not waste any time, come across the ring, and really take it to DJ in round one, because what he doesn't want is to get to round two. Round two is the MMA round, and I think that's where Demetrious Johnson should not mess around one bit. Don't have an ego. Come straight for his legs, take him down, and from there, it's got to be MMA all day. So if I have to give a prediction, it's a lot closer than I think people are saying. Surviving with Rodtang is really tough, but Demetrious Johnson, one of the best mixed martial artists in the world, if he gets a hold of you, I think it's done in round two.
Yeah, good explanation on the gloves. All right, Matt Wells, man, tell me how this fight plays out. What's your prediction?
It's as simple as, can DJ get it to the MMA rounds? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. It's no different than what we talk about all the time when we compare MMA to boxing, right? We always say the boxer is going to win in boxing, the MMA fighter is going to win in MMA. It's the same thing here. We're just talking, a different striking discipline outside of the MMA rules. So if DJ can get it to the MMA, obviously you want to see him go in there and try to get takedowns and, work his jiu-jitsu game. I mean, could you imagine another mousetrap submission, lifting him up in the air and slapping on the armbar? Like, that would be incredible. But he has to do something like that in the MMA rounds. Striking wise, I think just stay on your bike and don't get caught with anything nasty. But it should be fun. It should be entertaining. And I do like Goz's point that this is the sort of thing that attracted DJ to One Championship, because of these weird sort of fun things that he could do there. That's why he's there. So I hope he has fun with it. Hopefully he doesn't end up on the wrong end of a highlight reel again, like his last outing. But I think it should be fun for everybody to watch this and really just enjoy the differences that kind of are at play here between a true Muay Thai kickboxer versus an MMA fighter, one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. So it should be fun, and I can't wait to watch it.
Definitely, and it's two of the respective best in their sport, alternating rounds. It's pretty interesting. I'm definitely going to wake up early to catch it. 1X is what it's called. Check it out. All right, folks, that is the Spinning Back Clique for this week. And, of course, along with 1X, there's lots of regional promotions going on and UFC Fight Night 205. And we got it all covered here on MMA Junkie, and we'll cover it all next week on Spinning Back Clique.